Hello, this is Kelsey Pelton. Welcome to my final assignment for the course Sustainable Energy for my Master's of Science in Engineering, Health, and Sustainability. This assignment is Where is Injustice? Here you can see what we will go over in this presentation. First, I will describe my energy audit scenario that I conducted and worked on throughout the entirety of this course. Next, I will go into main justice implications that are relevant to my particular energy audit. And next, I will go into furthermore which ones are relevant. And out of those, there's distribution, recognition, procedural, restorative energy justice implications. And I chose the ones that are most relevant towards my particular scenario. And then next, I will talk about who can and should address these particular injustices. And then finally, how addressing energy injustices in my scenario will also help doing the same in my MESH project as a whole. So the energy audit that I conducted for this course and worked on throughout the entirety of the course was a 42-story building located in downtown Denver, Colorado. I particularly focused on one story of the building for this audit, which is an office space. It's an office space that's just like sort of like a tech office. There's a lot of computers, approximately 150 employees. And the reason that I focused on that floor is because I am very familiar with that floor. So I knew what sort of technologies run on more often than others. In addition, my mesh project focuses on helping businesses becoming more sustainable. So by focusing on one business, I was able to really dive deeply into ways that that business can help themselves become more sustainable, particularly in this case in terms of energy use. So the first aspect that pertains to my particular energy audit is distributive or distributional justice. And as we learned in this week's module's presentation, this means the distribution of burdens or benefits in society. So it's basically how people judge what they receive in a sense. So there's a lot of scenarios for this or examples, but an example could be public schools where all students have equal opportunity to attend is distributive justice. The second aspect that I will focus on that pertains to my energy audit is recognition justice implications. And again, as we learned, this is basically individual self realization. Furthermore, it's recognition of human dignity and differences between subaltern groups and dominant society. So, I will get further into these two topics in the following slides. So, how does distributive justice and implications relate to my particular energy audit? Well, the Initiative for Energy Justice frames this topic as outcome focused and speaks to whether all equally share in the benefits and burdens of the energy system. So, in this particular building, the energy is shared throughout the 42 floors, and all those floors are benefiting from that share of energy. So, in order to make changes, the different businesses need to come together to make a difference in the building as a whole. And this in turn would make a difference on greater society. So, for example, installing solar panels. Well, that would be a decision of the entire building. So, like the building managers or owners would need to make that decision. But one floor can't make that decision. So, if this particular floor that I studied realizes their huge consumption of energy and how it's emitting a lot and how they're the only ones benefiting from it, and they say we want solar panels, well, all the other floors need to want that too and need to come together to go to the building management and say, hey, we need this. And this could be persuaded. So this is basically persuaded by all the people renting this building, not just one floor, because this one floor is just benefiting from the energy, but they need to be showing how they can distribute their energy and reduce the impacts on society. So, furthermore, distributive justice reflects on equitably distributing the benefits of energy, infrastructure, and systems. So the building that I studied, as I said, uses extremely high amounts of energy, and therefore it's just emitting a lot of greenhouse gases. So by reducing this energy consumption, it will in turn reduce impacts on society around, hence less greenhouse gases being emitted into the environment. So comparing this to answers from what my critical friends talked about on my particular topic, my critical friends brought up that distributive is an issue because the negative externalities are associated with overconsumption or inefficient uses of energy in an office building. And this really only has monetary costs for the owners and the renters of the building. But the environmental and the social costs are passed on to people, environments, ecosystems that receive no benefits from the office building or energy use. So this connects to what I was saying in my perspective of how the the building uses all this energy, but it's only really impacting themselves. They get to, use the computers and do all this and that. And in turn, they just have to pay large prices. So they need to come together to realize that the monetary costs are important in reducing and that they need to think at the bigger picture also beyond the energy use. There are implications associated with that, such as hurting the environment around. As we learned in this week's module, recognition justice regards individual self realization, and furthermore, recognition of human dignity and the difference between lower status groups and dominant society. So, therefore, different types of vulnerability and the needs of society with energy services among groups really needs to be considered. Recognition justice also pertains to who is recognized, who's affected, who's impacted, and who's responsible. So, in the case of my particular energy audit, and similarly for large corporations with large profits, and at times even small corporations, they're really responsible for understanding and reducing their impacts because they are negatively affecting others. So, whether it's a corporation or an individual home or whatever it may be, you are responsible for understanding the effects that you have on others. So, this particular building is located near many vulnerable groups in low income areas. So, by emitting large amounts of emissions, they're having a large effect on vulnerable groups. And that should be recognized and really needs to be worked on in order to not affect particularly vulnerable groups. In discussion with one of my critical friends, one of my critical friends brought up the point that recognition is an aspect for my particular energy audit because it takes into account the historical effects of the energy use on people and the environment. Looking beyond economic egalitarianism to include fixing social and power inequalities. So this ties into my points that I brought up regarding affecting vulnerable groups and how we should be recognizing who we are affecting, how, and how we can make change. Now that we've looked at the implications, it's important to understand who can and should address these injustices. So first off are the tenants, which in this case are the business owners. On the particular floor that I did an energy audit of, the business rents out that entire floor. So the business is a tenant of the entire 42-story building. And it's up to them to make change and notice the energy use and educate employees on how to reduce it. So some examples would be to turn off lights when not using the space and make sure the employees know that when they leave a particular, let's say, office room, they should turn off the lights because the office room, let's say, won't be used until the next set of employees go into the room. Other things are turning off computers when leaving the office. I've gone in after hours or on days when tenants are working remotely, and I've noticed all kinds of computers on, all kinds of lights left on, and there's no one even in the space. So these employees should be educated to turn off any devices that don't need to be on when they are not present. Furthermore, the business owner should encourage or allow more days of remote working. So, for example, this business has 3 days in person and 2 days remotely. They could reduce this to, let's say, 2 days in person and 3 days remotely. And that would reduce the amount of energy use in the office because it's less days that employees are physically in the office using energy. And these changes are not only for environmental benefits, but they're also to reduce the amount that is paid on the energy bill, which through doing this audit, I found out is a very high bill. So it's a win-win situation, both for the environment and for reducing energy costs. Next is the local government. This building is located in downtown with a lot of other large skyscrapers around it. And local government should recognize the negative impacts that these large buildings have and the lack of efficiency, and they should provide programs or incentives to reduce consumption, and that could have a trickle effect on all of these large buildings downtown. If there's some sort of incentive for them to reduce consumption, they're more likely to want to. And this is very similar for federal government. Same thing goes for it. They could provide grants, funding, or just ways to reduce energy use, and this would make businesses more likely want to reduce their energy use if there was some sort of incentive or grant behind helping them, even just helping them figure out where to start in terms of reducing their energy use. And my critical friend agreed that these would be great stakeholders. My critical friends particularly pointed out governments, stating that government incentives might be the best way to motivate the building owners, who then would motivate the business owners and their employees. And particularly one of my critical friend peers also works in an office building and is a huge proponent of remote working. So hopefully the development of new technologies will reduce the demand for office space, and offices and headquarters can become smaller and more efficient, according to that critical friend. So there was a commonality between agreements of who can be stakeholders in this scenario to help reduce energy consumption and help these justice implications in my project. And finally, how addressing energy injustices in my particular energy audit scenario can help doing the same for my MESH project as a whole. My MESH project focuses on helping businesses become more sustainable, and I'm looking at a bunch of different types of business industries, and when helping them become more sustainable, I'm showing them the benefits both cost-wise and in the environmental benefits. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because obviously it's important to become more sustainable and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, our impacts on the environment, etc. But many businesses sometimes don't necessarily care about those aspects, or that's not their top priority. But a lot of the times when you put things in terms of cost savings, businesses want to hear it. So this audit was a perfect example of a business with high energy use, and their impacts on the environment aren't necessarily their top priority, but reducing their energy use and saving themselves money maybe. And this business has no staff person to put this into perspective for them, and nobody to tell them why it matters that they should be reducing their energy consumption, and nobody to show them how they can reduce their consumption, the injustices that they are, going along, and the implications that they're having on surrounding areas. They just don't necessarily know this. So for me to put that into perspective for them, it's really helpful. And that helps me with my MESH project as a whole, because I'm trying to put that into perspective for businesses, because there are hundreds of thousands of businesses around the world. And a lot of the times that's where a big difference can be made by having businesses make change. So this was a great example for tying a actual real life project into what I want my MESH project to turn into. Thank you overall for listening. This course has taught me a lot about energy, and this particular energy audit that was a real life scenario helped me understand many injustices that can be correlated with it, as well as environmental and social impacts that come with energy use. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.